So it looks like Sarah, you're here now. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, how's it going?
Cool. We are super excited to have Sarah Morris, who is the new director, capital D director of Open Technology Institute's program on something, right? there's more to that title, I feel like, right, Sarah?
New America's Open Technology Institute. New America is a think tank with a lot of different programs, and the Open Technology Institute is our tech advocacy and policy arm.
Awesome. Very succinct. And Sarah, I feel like it's perfect that we get you on first, since you're such an expert on these issues and can maybe answer some of people's kind of like burning questions. And I feel like the one that keeps coming up just like over and over again, and that's especially going to come up today, given that it's the 1-year anniversary of the repeal actually going into effect, is that we're going to be hearing both kind of like lobbyists and people that have a special interest in this, but also maybe people who are just a little confused or maybe read some misinformation. We're going to be saying things like, look, it's a year since this repeal went into effect, and here we are on this epic live stream. Apparently the internet still works. So were these net neutrality activists just full of it the whole time? Or, what's the deal? Why should we care if it's been a year without net neutrality and quote unquote nothing bad has happened? So can you untangle that a little bit for folks and maybe explain some of what's going on?
Sure, thanks, Evan. First of all, bad things have happened. I think most notably, we saw during the terrible California wildfires, we saw Verizon throttling their firefighters' data plans, and there is some folks will instantly respond and say, oh, well, that wasn't a real net neutrality violation, but that just illustrates the point. We have no cop on the beat to figure out when a net neutrality violation is occurring, because the FCC, when it repealed the 2015 rules that everyone loved, completely abdicated its role of a rulemaker and enforcer when it comes to internet policy and net neutrality in particular. And so there's numerous examples. Public Knowledge has a great blog post up from, I think, January that outlines several different examples of violations that have occurred or questionable behavior that was precisely the sort of thing that the net neutrality framework was designed to analyze. Meanwhile, it's not that unsurprising that we're not seeing, like violation after violation, week after week after week, even though we've seen quite a few bad behavior since the rules were repealed. But the internet service providers are also engaged in this litigation challenging the repeal of the rules, and we would expect them to be on their best behavior while that litigation is pending.
Sorry, Sarah. We're still doing IT over here to try to get onto a computer for some point today. But that's all really helpful, and I think it is super important to underscore that things have happened in this last year. And also, I think it's just important for folks to understand, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. When I think about it, it's not so much like it's like a meteor hitting the internet. It's more like the internet is getting sick, or has some poison running through its veins now. And over time, the things that we love about it, the fact that it's so diverse and where there's so many different viewpoints and so much different content and so much different creativity, and where it's not controlled by just a handful of corporations, you can sort of already seeing it going in that direction, right? Where it's getting more centralized, more and more of our speech is controlled by, a very small handful of very large companies. We're starting to see some of the problems with that. And if we don't restore net neutrality, it seems like the internet's just going to kind of keep heading in that direction, since no one will ever be able to compete with these very large tech companies if they can't enter the battlefield, if you will, on a level playing field. Would you agree with that?
I think that's exactly right, Evan. And you make a really great point. We are concerned about explicit violations of net neutrality, and we want to remedy behavior that is affecting whether or not internet users can access the content of their choosing. But the broader point and the real importance of strong net neutrality protections is that it protects the internet as an ecosystem for innovation, for openness, and for the type of permissionless access and innovation that made the internet what it is today. And so when those rules were repealed, that was sort of the starting point, the pivotal moment where we start to move away from that ecosystem of permissionless innovation and effortless sharing of ideas, and into an ecosystem that will become increasingly more closed, more expensive, and challenging to navigate for smaller companies and everyday internet users. And that's a real problem. It's a problem not just because of one specific type of content being blocked, although that's a problem in and of itself, but it's a problem because it's moving towards a way of existing that's so antithetical to where we've come from.
Right, and I think it's worth underscoring that, like, that's not just a problem for like how fast your Netflix videos are gonna load. I mean, at this point, the internet is so integrated into every aspect of our society that, you know, that centralization, that kind of decay of the things that we've loved about the internet has profound implications for almost everything, from human rights to the functioning of our democracy, to the future of journalism and you know, access to information and knowledge. So it really does feel like we're at a kind of pivotal moment where the actions that we take are going to determine, you know, does the internet have a net positive effect on society or a net negative effect on society? And I think that that's a question that, you know, hasn't yet been decided, and that's the battleground that we're kind of fighting on right now with this issue of net neutrality.
That's right, and it's an incredibly important battle, and you know, we're at a pivotal moment in that fight as well.
Yeah, so let's quickly talk about that. And Sarah, feel free to just yell at me if you got to get going, because I know you're.
Okay.
But you know, maybe one last kind of thought is just, you know, I explained just before you joined a little bit about what the unanimous consent request today means. But maybe could you just quickly give an overview of that, and then also sort of what happens next? So we know this moment today, it's going to be an important symbolic moment. But you know, we're likely not going to walk away after today with net neutrality rules having been restored. So what's going to happen next in terms of the federal court case that's ongoing, and potential next steps after that?
Yeah, so my understanding is that one or more senators will ask for unanimous consent on the Save the Internet Act that has already passed the House. And if any senator objects, which will probably happen, then that the request for unanimous consent will fail. But that's not the end of the fight, and it's important for folks to stay engaged and stay energized. And Evan, you mentioned the litigation, the court case. So many groups, public interest groups, activist groups, and 24, I think, state attorneys general, a bunch of companies and their trade associations all sued the FCC when the FCC overturned the 2015, repealed the 2015 Open Internet Order. And so that litigation, that court challenge, is still pending. We had oral arguments earlier this year where we actually went into court and made our case in front of a panel of 3 judges. And we're just waiting while the judges write their decision, the dissents, et cetera. And that litigation, that decision could actually come any Tuesday or Friday from now on. So we could see a decision today at 10 o'clock Eastern time, though it could also be any other Tuesday or Friday. And once that happens, that'll be another important moment where we can reassess where we are strategically in the fight to restore the rules. It's possible that the court will undo the FCC's 2017 repeal. It's possible that the judges will send the 2017 repeal back to the FCC for a redo, in which case there's a lot of different ways that can play out. And so we're anticipating another round of energy and activism once that decision drops.
Got it. Well, that's super helpful, Sarah. And once that decision drops, my understanding is that it could even open up the opportunity for another Congressional Review Act resolution and or another kind of fight at the FCC. Is that correct?
Certainly another fight at the FCC, depending, and there's a lot of different outcomes, which are like really hard to predict. And so until we actually see the decision, it's hard to kind of navigate to imagine what or to predict what a specific scenario will be. But if the court sends the 2017 repeal back to the FCC, then if they wanted to repeal the rules, they'll have to go through an entire months-long regulatory process with opportunities for notice and comment, and then they'll have to have another order at the end of that, even if they wanted to just like essentially redo what they did in 2017. All of that's going to have to happen in the lead up to an election year with an already busy plate for the FCC, and so it's it could be that the commission declines to try again. And then depending on how the court decision is worded, we may have the 2015 rules back in place, or we may need to wait and do another proceeding down the road to clean all that up. But, and the question about the CRA, if the FCC does do another order redoing the repeal, then in theory, that order would be subject to the same Congressional Review Act parameters. So there'd be a window of time during which Congress could consider the validity of that order through a Congressional Review Act.
Got it.
Lots of different ways.
Sorry.
Lots of different ways it could play out, and the fight is not over. I think that's the takeaway. There's a lot of maneuvering and strategy left to play out.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, is that it seems like the main takeaway for folks out there who are watching is just don't give up. There's lots of different paths forward. And it sounds like actually, overall, we're sort of winning this fight. I mean, we have the public on our side. We're building bipartisan support in Congress, which is something that we haven't really had in the past, even though this is an overwhelmingly cross-partisan issue for voters. And it seems like it's, we have to keep fighting. We have to keep pushing. We have to keep reminding them that people are still paying attention by calling our senators, by contacting our House representatives, by making sure that we're speaking out about this on social media and keeping it in the news and writing letters to the editor and things like that. But that, we've got some paths forward, and as long as we keep pushing and keep fighting, it's sort of only a matter of time before net neutrality is the law of the land again. Yeah,
that's absolutely right. There's a lot left to be done, but as you mentioned, Evan, a ton of energy. 83% of the public supports net neutrality, supports the 2015 rules, and now it's just a matter of translating that energy into movement in Congress and at the FCC.
Got it. Well, Sarah, do you have tell me about your time schedule. Are you good? Do you need to head out? I can't get any messages from my team because I'm on this iPad, so I don't know where we're at in our time. I don't want to keep you on here too long, so let me know.
We're at 9:30 now, and I don't see any notes on my end from your team. I'm happy to keep chatting, but also happy to step off if you've got a queue of other VIPs to chat.
Must be the petition delivery.
Cool. I know we're going to go live to. There's folks that are going to be doing a delivery to Mitch McConnell's office in a little bit, but I haven't heard anything that they're quite ready yet. So I'm trying to think of any other important questions that we could go over here. I mean, I think going back to some of the initial question I had for you around sort of some of the misinformation or things that people might hear today around, it's been a year and nothing bad has happened. I mean, another one that we just heard over and over and over again that I'd be willing to bet we're going to hear from whichever senator gets up to object to this unanimous consent request today is, net neutrality is a government takeover of the internet. Could you address that a little bit? I mean, I think both your organization and my organization have spent a lot of time opposing government takeovers of internet or government surveillance of the internet, or government overreach more broadly. So can you untangle this a little bit for people? Why are we hearing this talking point, and why is it incorrect?
Well, I mean, we're hearing it because it's a talking point from the internet service providers. They don't want these rules. They don't want any rules. They want to be in a regulation-free environment. so that they can figure out new ways to monetize how internet users access content and how content creators access internet users. That's the bottom line. This is not a government takeover of the internet. As someone who, I've worked on net neutrality issues for a decade or more. The 2015 Open Internet Order that has the rules that were held up in court in the previous round of litigation, this is a carefully calibrated, light touch approach to ensuring that internet users have clear net neutrality protections. The FCC has the ability to evaluate new problematic behavior as it comes as it comes into existence, and a light touch regulatory regime to evaluate those problems as they come up. This was not. This is three rules: no blocking, no throttling, and no paid prioritization, and then some additional authority for the FCC to just evaluate situations as they come up. And really, this is just designed to provide a counterweight to the tremendous control that internet service providers have as the gateway between your eyes and your access and the rest of the internet. So because you only subscribe to one internet service provider, you have no other choice at any given moment if you want to access the internet. You have to go through them. And so that control has necessitated, and we've demonstrated through all of the potential problems that can come up with that gatekeeper power. That has necessitated this light touch approach just to ensure that there are rules of the road to keep the internet open, which is how the internet has always existed up until the 2017 repeal.
Got it. Yeah, and I think it's just super important to underscore that like, these are like the most basic, like baseline protections, and really it is hilarious to hear like the FCC talk about light touch when like what we have is light, or what we had away was a very light touch. I mean, it's really just these very basic rules of the road that just sort of says, you can't royally screw over internet users, and you can't, control and manipulate the information that's passing along the infrastructure that you built with a tremendous amount of tax subsidies, I might add.
Right.
So go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say that what we see is this continually shifting narrative and moving of the goalposts too when it comes to criticisms of any iteration of net neutrality protections. If the commission implements something that's more of like a standard by which to evaluate behavior, then everyone says, no, we need clear rules. If the commission imposes clear rules, then the ISPs complain that those rules are too clear, that they need more flexibility. And so no matter what the commission does, the internet service providers are going to grumble because it precludes them from engaging in the types of business models that would amount to what you just described, Evan, royally screwing over consumers. And so, the rhetoric around how severe.
That is the technical legal term, right, Sarah? Sarah's an attorney, so we have to royally screw over is in your lawsuit somewhere, right?
Probably not, but.
I just realized, I just saw we have a question that came in on the chat that might be worth addressing. And then I do think we're going to be hopefully going to the petition delivery at Mitch McConnell's office shortly after that. And we can let you get on with your day, Sarah.
Excellent.
So last question for you. And again, we're talking to Sarah Morris, who's the director of the New America Foundation's Open Technology Institute. Did I get it right this time?
Mostly. We dropped Foundation a few years ago. New America's Open Technology Institute.
Open Technology Institute. I'm going to get this right next time. And so, Sarah, we just had a question come in on the chat. Or there's two, actually. And maybe you can kind of tackle them both quickly because you're a genius. So one is, let's say 2020 goes to a pro net neutrality candidate, or 2024. how easy would it be for a new chair of the FCC to undo what's been done here, assuming that we get there without bad legislation passing? And maybe it'd be worth it to mention that as well. And then the second question was, T-Mobile launched their binge on service while net neutrality was technically still in effect. Do you folks see that as a net neutrality violation? And how can we have an even more robust version of net neutrality than we had before? I think these are both, really interesting questions, and feel free to, pick one and run with it, or try to tackle both if you can.
I think I can tackle both. To the first question, what happens in 2020 or 2024 if we get a leadership at the FCC that is more inclined to support strong, robust net neutrality protections? How easy is it to undo what's been done? Well, I mean, so the entire premise of most of the lawsuits challenging the net neutrality rules, and then now challenging the repeal of those rules, focuses on how much discretion the FCC has to make decisions and to change its mind about those decisions. And the short answer is that the federal agencies typically have a lot of discretion to change their mind. And we don't need to get into the full legal history here, but the DC Circuit Court of Appeals has already upheld Title II, which was the legal support, the legal basis for the 2015 rules, as a proper use of authority for those rules. So it follows that the commission likely has the ability to reverse course as a matter of regulatory policy and reinstate net neutrality. There would undoubtedly, well, I don't know if undoubtedly, there would likely be a legal challenge if the FCC did that, but since the FCC has already prevailed at the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, they would likely do so again. And the Supreme Court declined to hear that case to see if it was decided wrongly. So as far as we know, that's good law. So yes, another FCC commission could reinstate the rules and reapply Title II authority to internet service providers. On the second question, so what do we do about zero rating is the sort of I think the question behind the question. And I talked a little bit before about the way that the 2015 rules were structured. They had 3 bright line rules that prohibited the most egregious types of behavior, and the commission had additional authority to evaluate new harms under a given set of criteria as they came into market. And so zero rating sort of fell pretty explicitly into that second bucket, the emerging potential harmful business models that the FCC would evaluate. And the FCC actually did evaluate zero rating plans and the Wireless Bureau released a sort of evaluation of those plans late, I think just before Ajit Pai came on as chair of the FCC, and found that certain versions of the plans were problematic. The chairman, upon becoming chairman, immediately sort of like threw that out in the trash, and that just declined to rely on any of that analysis. So yeah, I think the question was there is there a more robust? Would we want to do something different if we did net neutrality again? Maybe, but the 2015 rules were a really nice balance of strength and flexibility. Is important going forward.
Awesome, Sarah. As usual, it's so important that we break down these like complicated things in ways that people can understand. And whenever I'm done hearing you talk about them, I'm like, oh, like I thought I understood that really well, and now I understand it even a little bit better.
Thanks so much, Evan.
Yeah, well, so thank you so much for coming on. It looks like we've got Ron Placone on now, which I assume means that he is on site at the petition delivery that's happening this morning at Mitch McConnell's office. And maybe Sarah, really quick before you leave, can you just quickly tell folks why are we delivering stuff to Mitch McConnell's office today? What does he have to do with this vote?
Well, he has everything to do with this vote. Mitch McConnell has said that net neutrality is dead on arrival in the Senate, and we know that that's not true because we've changed the hearts and minds of senators before. So this petition drive is designed to do just that, to explain to Mitch McConnell and demonstrate to him that this is a bipartisan issue, cross-partisan issue for the American people, and it should be in Congress as well.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah Morris, for joining us. You're a total bad. I can't say what I was about to say on the stream because we're not allowed to say it. You're really great, and we really appreciate your expertise in kicking off the stream today. And everyone go follow. Where can folks follow you on social media, Sarah? You and OTI.
Twitter is at OTI, at the letters OTI, and I'm at Sar Morris, SARMORRIS.
Awesome. Definitely follow Sarah and OTI to keep yourself updated on information that you need to know about all of this stuff. So thanks so much, Sarah.